Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to Procrastinator's Pit Stop. I am sitting with another amazing guest for you today. I am sitting here with Trinn Hatch. Trinn, who's a former security specialist who was severely injured in a life-altering assault, overcame debilitating chronic pain and PTSD through holistic plant-based healing, and eventually co-founded Jamfa, a Tibetan pharmacy, to share powerful botanical medicines and inspire natural healing. Trinn, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. It's wonderful to be here.
We are definitely happy to have you here. It's an interesting topic we're going to dive into in just a moment. But before we do dive into things, we like to have an icebreaker on the show. And the question for you today is, which cartoon character do you resonate with the most and why?
That was a pretty easy one to answer because only one really popped out at me. I wasn't huge on cartoons when I was a kid, but it was He-Man. I don't know if people are old enough to remember that show. Actually, there's a new revamped version I just watched on Netflix. I was like a kid in a candy store again. I thought this is amazing. But yeah, I always liked the idea of people with strength and power using it to help others. I felt that's part of what called me into security was protecting other people. And so that resonated with me pretty strongly when you asked that question.
Love it. I love He-Man. Just that idea of being all powerful and being able to help others. Definitely love it. So, Trin, how would you describe procrastination and what does it mean to you personally?
I mean, really, in a nutshell, procrastination means not being in the moment, not being present in the moment, and operating within that moment. Part of my journey has been uh, learning to stay in the moment. We're projecting into the future and we're hung up on things in the past. And we have this never ending tirade of thoughts that's just popping up in the ocean of our mind with no rhyme or reason. And you cling to one of those or attach to one of those, and all of a sudden you're off and you're out of that moment. And so, that's a big part of my journey has been learning to to realize a state of awareness, which is just pure being, where the thoughts come in like a dancer on a dance floor and dances off as fast as they come in. There's no attachment, there's no clinging. And so when I stay in that point of awareness, that's when procrastination doesn't happen. If I air out of there, at times, you kick the can down the road on things you don't think are a big deal, but you kick enough cans down the road and you got a pile of cans.
I like that. I like that answer, kicking the can down the road. Yeah, I gave an example similar to that actually. Kicking the can down the road and you just don't want to pick up the can, right? But you kick it down the road long enough, eventually it gets dented, it breaks, it gets rusty, it gets sharp edges, and then when you eventually do pick it up, it hurts a lot.
Yeah, exactly.
So I like that. I like that analogy. So you said that staying in the moment has been kind of your secret sauce to get over procrastination. Is that the only thing you've used?
That is the only secret sauce. I mean, I've tried everything else, to be honest. In Tibetan teachings, it's called the Great Perfection, which is purely a state of being without being controlled or manipulated or having anything within your experience changed because of thoughts. Thoughts, when they become non-clinging and they're just this thing, this phenomena that moves through our mind, then that awareness bursts forth and it's like a shining star. It's there and everything that comes into it gets burnt up in that state of awareness. And that's the place of peace and compassion and connection and really contentment that I've been able to find. And it's really only been in the last 4 or 5 years that I've found that. And it's something like all of us, I think I've been searching for my whole life.
Well, no, that's definitely an issue that many of us have, those racing thoughts. You know, I'm definitely a big proponent of that as well. Being in the moment, different ways of doing that. However, one of the interesting things that you deal in, that you have knowledge in, is natural remedies for things. One of the things that I wanted to really dig in and ask you about was we have several different things that we could use for focus. I've heard ginseng. I've heard there's several other ones as well. Do you think that there's any one that might particularly help a lot with maybe just focus or being in the moment?
Yeah, I mean, different herbs have different benefits. In my experience with plant pharmacology is there's a lot more that can be done in a formulation when there's multiple plant constituents within that formulation. In my experience, singular herbs and botanicals on their own have their place and they have their benefits, but it's very much confined. There's not so much expansion in the healing potential of that plant. But when you add in 5, 6, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 different synergistic botanicals, you're creating a symphony, an ensemble of support. I liken it oftentimes to special forces. You send in a team of 6 guys. You can send them underwater, they can do something. You can send them in the air, they can do something. You can send them on a moving train. They have so many skill sets that they can adapt and change into that specific need. And it's very dynamic in the way that it works. And so this is how Tibetan pharmacology or phytotherapy has really excelled over the last 2,500 years, is understanding that synergistic connection. But not only that, learning how to apply it and direct that healing potential into specific areas of the body. And so we created some formulas for focus. I've had ADHD my whole life. I was on Ritalin when I was younger. I was on Adderall. Nothing helped. And we created a formula called White Elephant, which has about 40 different botanicals and supplements in there. Until we created that formula, I was able to get by without using Adderall, using herbal supplements, but I always needed something. Almost every day, if I wanted to focus and do something, I'd need some support. When I started using that White Elephant, it changed my brain chemistry completely. I had new neural pathways that came up. Instead of having to focus 60 minutes of work into 10 minutes of actual focus, I all of a sudden had 60 minutes and 60 minutes of focus. Now I could do a lot more than I was able to do before. And so that formula was created to give your brain what it needs to create new neural pathways to change the way that we do things. And so, that's that synergy and that formula, that phytotherapy formula, has the ability to turn that trajectory of not being able to focus completely around. And that's, I think, the difference between Tibetan phytotherapy and other modalities, is this understanding that it's the mind, the body, and the spirit. They all need to heal. They all need to be given some focus in order for that holistic healing to happen. And so the emotional aspect of ADHD, the anxiety aspect, the other things that pop up, these are all things that are also managed by the synergy of the botanicals. And so it's giving your body the tools that it needs to be able to change, heal, regenerate, and repair itself, and helping to awaken the body's natural ability to do so.
No, thank you for that, and I love that. I'm a big proponent of looking for natural remedies because we often turn to pills or other things that are chemically made. I've had experience in my past with things like Paxil or Prozac or whatever the heck they were pushing to try to balance that brain chemistry out, right? But I often thought that the natural remedies kind of, I don't know when it happened when we transitioned from getting everything from nature to let's slam some chemicals in there.
When we moved into gasoline, that's when it happened. We hit a juncture in our history where we had the choice of moving into petro or moving into hemp, and we outlawed hemp and we moved into petro. Hemp, that plant alone with 3,000 terpenes that are in there, has huge, abundant healing potential. Petro, you keep people on a revolving door using petroleum-based products and medicines, and they have to keep coming back and buying them. Our biggest challenge as a company is we help people heal, and then we don't have a customer anymore. And that's wonderful. That's what we're here to do, but it doesn't match up very well with the Western model of capitalism. And so, it's really interesting to watch hemp now resurface itself and this awareness coming back into natural healing. And all of a sudden, cannabis isn't a plant of the devil, but it has healing potential when not abused. And so we're starting to see a resurfacing of this information and understanding, and people are turning back from that Petra back into natural healing modalities.
No, I definitely like that, like what you said there about the different components and things. I mean, because there are, well, cannabis is the obvious one, but I'm sure there are other ones where there might be some undesirable effects. But with new technology, we've been able to extract those things and separate those different elements, right? So, like with cannabis, you take out the THC, and now you can now separate out CBD, CBG, CBN, all of which have different uses. Are there other plants like that where only certain extracts are taken because there might be some other attributes they don't necessarily want?
Not that we use in anything that we're doing, so everything's very safe. Yeah, I found that Tibetan medicine is the safest of all of the medicines I've used. I went through a period of using hemp and RSO oil to help myself get healthy, and during that course, about $6,000 my dad spent on it to help me when I was on disability, and it turned out to be tainted. It had heavy metals and pesticides in there. I got sicker from it. And so there's a lot of stuff out there that isn't made with the type of integrity that needs to have in order for us to trust it to really heal ourselves. Tibetan medicine is the first modality that I've found that's really held that integrity to the highest standard. In 4.5 years of working with people, doing consultations, I haven't had an adverse side effect or somebody call me and say, "Hey, your medicine did this to me." It just doesn't happen. And a big part of that is because the medicine, our body's biochemistry is hardwired to the energetics of plants. And what that means is that our body's biochemistry speaks the same language as plants. And so when plants are communicating with our biochemistry can understand it and communicate back. When we take a pill, we're forcing a response chemically within the body that helps to alleviate a symptom or help with a problem that we're having. But it's not enabling the body's innate healing wisdom to fix the problem or regenerate or restore from it, or at least change the trajectory from a degenerative one into a regenerative trajectory.
I like the way that you said that, and it brings up a very interesting question and a very interesting debate, as it relates to getting vitamins sourced naturally versus scooping down this one vitamin C, which was all natural product. It had natural fruit extracts and things, right? And then there's another one which is this ascorbic acid. It's funny, but they did some research where when they took the ascorbic acid, the body doesn't process it exactly the same as a natural source. I mean, I'm sure you can confirm that. Is that
Yeah, that's right. It's the same for a lot of things. Are you familiar with a substance called shilajit?
trilogy? Can't say that
Shilajit's
I
an
am.
ancient mineral supplement that comes from the Himalayas, originally found in the Himalayas. It contains up to 90 minerals. That's an accumulation within the Himalayas for 16,000 years in some cases. And when it's purified and added to the correct adaptogenic botanicals are included with it, it becomes a really powerful regenerative restorative supplement. It's actually described in the ancient medical tantras as destroyer of weakness and conqueror of mountains. And so, shilajit's sold all over the place, and people take it and they eat it pure, just a little glob, basically, of black tar. But the absorption is so low because, as Tibetan medicine and Ayurveda have understood, there's botanicals, adaptogens that need to go with those minerals to help it integrate and absorb into the body. And so if we don't have that element in the medicine, then you're just pushing stuff through your body. Your body's not uptaking it, and you're dispelling it, and you think you need more. And so if you have a powerful 10,000 milligram supplement, people are buying it off the shelf because it's the strongest one themselves, but potentially you're only getting 100 milligrams out of that. So that's something really to be aware of in where you're buying your medicine from is are they synergistic with their approach, with their process, with their philosophy and their business as the other things that you're taking? Because some medicines don't work well with others. So the beauty of Tibetan medicine is it will work well in the playground with anything or anyone. It's not ever going to cause an interaction or problem. But that's not the case with some supplements.
And I can see that as being one of the biggest misconceptions, right, around Tibetan medicine. But what do you think is the biggest misconception?
Around Tibetan medicine, that it's a Buddhist medicine, that it's somehow related to some religious, whatever. It hasn't been my experience at all. It's very much related to love and compassion. It's a healing science that originated in Tibet, where Buddhism is, it's was one of its strongholds. If I came here and created a company called American Medicine, we wouldn't call that a Christian company just because I'm a Christian. It's a spiritual and religious thing that really needs to be defined as different. There's a spiritual aspect to the medicine that we make, but not a religious aspect. And so that's been, the thing that I've had to educate people on probably the most, more than anything. And when people understand that, and I tell them that I'm a Christian minister myself and went to a seminary and had a whole part of my life when I was younger where I did that, kind of breaks the ice. And they go, "Well, what are you doing working with a Buddhist company?" I said, "Well, it's not about religion. It's about love. That's the thread that connects us all. And if we focus on that, then these barriers are no longer going to be visible." And people look at me like I'm kind of weird, but there's not much you can say to that unless you want to argue. And so to give you an example, we went to a Barbara O'Neill conference 2 weeks ago and I spoke on stage with her. And, most of those people are Christian, very devout Christians, a lot of Messianic Jews. And they're having a big hang up coming over to our booth and trying our medicine because, there's pictures of a Buddhist monastery where some of the medicines come from and they feel like they're cheating on their religion. And so, I spent about half an hour talking to a couple of the main people and just explaining my journey with spirituality and what I've experienced for myself and seen and expressing this to the West. And it's very, very rare that somebody doesn't at least come around and say, "Well, I'm going to go by how I'm feeling and I feel good about this. So I'm just going to go with it. But, I'm still not have my mind made up yet." And so, other than that, the proof is really in the pudding. As soon as people try the medicine, they resonate with it and they feel the difference, and things change quickly in perception.
I like the way you said that. The proof is in the pudding. It's been a while since I've heard that one, but I like it. But what do you think was the most amazing use case that you've seen,
This case,
or the most amazing result?
there's been a lot, but probably the closest for me is my mother. She had a pineal gland tumor about 10 years ago, and they removed it. She died on the table, had a clot form in the visual cortex, it exploded. She stroked out, killed all of her neurons, lost a big chunk of her brain, just dead matter. And she died and was brought back after a few minutes as an invalid. She didn't know who she was. She didn't know where she was for a long time. She was just very unconnected. And so we put her in front of all the best doctors in the world, literally, like the best neural ophthalmologists in the world, to try to help her get her vision back and repair her mind. And they all said the same thing, that it's impossible to regenerate neurons in the visual cortex. Go home and get comfortable. We've done everything we can for you. You're lucky to be alive. And if you know my mom, she doesn't like being told things like that. And so she put her, she really put her foot down and said, no, I'm not going to let this guy dictate how I live the rest of my life. I'm going to find a way to fix this. And we put her in front of all different types of healing modalities, hyperbaric chambers, red light saunas, just about everything you can think of. But the one thing we couldn't fix for her, even though most of her cognitive function, her ability to move around and engage was back, was her executive function in her brain wouldn't allow her to do more than one thing in focus. And she had lost much of her vision. And so about 3 months after I met our Tibetan physician, I asked him if he would make a formula for her. Or I asked him first if it was possible to regenerate neurons in the visual cortex. And he looked at me with a funny look and he said, why do we need to do that? I said, well, my mother doesn't have any and she'd like to be able to see. And he kind of smirkingly said, oh, well, you don't need neurons in the visual cortex to see. And I thought, what? That can't be right. Well, he made that formula for her, white elephant, and within 6 months, she was in a study in upstate New York and started to map new neurons firing as her head was kept in a steady position, and she would see these little pinpricks come up on a screen. And so she's now, not just because of this medicine, but also because of everything else that she's done, but she's got 55% of her vision back in one eye, 35% back in another. She's got her executive functions back to the point where 4 months ago she agreed to come back on out of retirement for 15 years and work as my CFO, which she did for most of her life. And so that gives you an idea of the turnaround in her brain, executive function, and ability to contribute to her life. It's phenomenal. So what White Elephant did was it helped her brain to repair and to regenerate from the trauma from her traumatic brain injuries.
Wow, that is such an amazing story, and I'm so happy that she was able to do that.
We are too.
But let me ask you, how long was that process for her? You said it was a few months of taking the.
I mean, she's been taking it now for over 2 years, and she keeps getting better. 3 years ago, she had to travel to Australia and she needed a wheelchair and somebody to take her through the airport. Maybe that was 4 years ago. Last year, she flew herself to Australia, flew herself to Cambodia, toured orphanages, raised money for kids in a Cambodian orphanage, spent 3 months traveling everywhere that she'd lived throughout her life, tying off old wounds with people and fixing relationships and reconnecting, doing all the things that she didn't think she was going to be able to do. She came back from that trip and she was a completely different person. I got my mom back. It was the mom that I remembered who could do 100 things at once and was jumping through hoops left, right, and center. And all of a sudden, you had to speak very slow and not move too fast. It was tough for me to see my mom reduced to that level of being. But now to watch her flourish and see her messages coming in with perfect clarity and her sage wisdom that she's always had coming through, it's a beautiful testament to the ability that we all have within us to be able to heal, no matter what it is.
As you were talking there, one of the thoughts that came to mind about a lot of the resistance, I think, is that we live in a instant gratification society. Now, not all medicines are instant either. I mean, so I don't think this is a very valid argument. But do you think that maybe some of the resistance is that they just don't give it long enough to work? I I would presume, like, yeah.
That's always the reason why medicines don't work in our situation. We offer a money back guarantee for people, but they have to tell us that they've actually followed the protocol for 3 months. Otherwise, we're not going to give their money back. That holds them accountable to do it. And so when I get people who call me and say, your medicine doesn't work, it sucks, nothing happened, I'll talk to them for an hour and kind of break the ice a little bit. And then I'll ask them when they're more apt to be honest. Did you actually take the medicine in every period that you need? Well, I missed 3 days because my daughter had a wedding, and then I was with the boys at a bachelor party, and I forgot it. And it was 4 days, man. We went to Cancun, and I'm like, drinking and partying and not taking the medicine is probably going to stop the healing trajectory, or slow it down at least. And so, in my experience, the medicine works because the body works, and the body knows how to heal itself, and the medicine awakens that ability. It's people not using it for a long enough period to take themselves out of the chronic or degenerative trajectory and establish a new healing trajectory. That takes time. It might have taken somebody 12 years to descend into a chronic illness. It's not going to take you 12 days to get out of it. It's not going to take you 12 years either, but you need to give your body enough time to do the work.
No, I love that, and that actually brings up another interesting question because you brought up alcohol and these different things. Um, especially in the Western world. I mean, the diets in North America, we're really keen on putting stuff into our bodies that doesn't work well. When you have these consultations, like, is there a list of things, obviously besides alcohol, that anything that we might find in our diet we might not consider to be counterproductive to what we're taking these different formulas, like things that might
Yeah, I
prevent
mean,
absorption, things like that.
no, alcohol is actually a driver, so it's going to drive the medicine deeper and faster into the body. But with anything, if you're taking too much, it's going to become a problem. Generally, with people, as far as lifestyle recommendations, it's eat healthy foods. Try to eat as organic and non-GMO and clean as you can. Lower your meat intake. Increase your vegetable intake. Drink mineral water, spring water rather than tap water. That's a big one. And just to keep yourself in a healing environment. You wouldn't want to go to a rock concert with a bunch of heavy metal bands if you're trying to heal yourself of some anxiety or PTSD. You want to put yourself into a place that's conducive to that healing to take place. Some people will use a protocol that we create for them with 20, 30 other medicines and supplements they're taking. And nothing that we give them will cause any interactions. It'll actually help with interactions that are being caused by taking all of those other medicines. And so when people use our medicines with traditional Western medicines, they often report back that, the side effects from my chemo or my radiation went down, or this is going away, or this is going away, but not reporting back compounded problems. It's always things are going away, not coming.
So for somebody who's maybe suffering from procrastination and the need to obviously be more in the moment, as you say, what specific products would you recommend for them?
For me, what's helped me the most have been healing heart, which is expanding the torus field, activation of the heart, which is where love permeates from, and the white elephant, which is for the mind. And I'll tell you what those two things have done for me. I really sat with it to come up with the right way to express it. And what I've learned through that, using those two and focusing on being in a state of awareness, is that that state of awareness is really a state where you're loving with everything that you do with your mind, which means every thought that comes in about the thing you didn't do or the thing bad you did, you're sending it love. It's pure love. All right, well, that happened in the past. Let me transmute it with love and let it go. And you think from your heart. We talk about a neural network in the brain that we think. Well, there's a neural network in the heart. It doesn't think, doesn't have thoughts like the brain does. It works off feelings and emotions and frequencies and vibrations. And when we start to live from that heart's intelligence, which is where all enlightened beings live from, we're no longer subject to the fabrications of thought that get us confused and muddled up. And so, love from your mind, think from your heart.
No, I love that. So with these protocols, do they also have, you obviously have a regimen of how you're supposed to take it, when you're supposed to take it, right? Do you also combine meditation or anything else into those protocols, or is that separate?
It's not a requisite, but if people want some guidance and assistance on finding the right meditation practice, and we love to help with that. We have lots of that information comes through in our emails. There's a lot of it in our blogs. So we'll support a person as much as they're willing to receive support, but we don't try to push it down a person's throat. We want to enable people and encourage them to be sovereign over their own health and give them the information, the tools to make sound decisions for themselves.
Now, you
As,
mentioned
as far
before.
as protocols, as far as protocols go, we have it's called heal.me/Jampa, and that's our consultation page. And that is free. We don't charge anybody for it. We'll spend 15 minutes with you and go over what your challenges are, provide information on the products that will help with those challenges. And then at your request, we'll create a free protocol for you. Send that protocol to you with the cost itemized, and you can decide whether you want to go forward with it or not. We have an amazing amazing bunch of reviews on there. They're all verified by the service. And that's really the best way if you're looking for help to find the fastest path and most effective path. And we're here to support you on your journey. We also are available through email and phone and text. And we have a wonderful team that are helping anybody who is in need, usually within a few hours.
Wow, a few hours. No, that's that's something that's amazing in this day and age for sure. Still, you mentioned that one of the biggest challenges that you were having before was sometimes the connotation that it might be related to Buddhism, but it's not. Besides that, what other major challenge did you have to overcome while building your business?
I'll just correct you 1 second. It is related to Buddhism, but Buddhism is considered in this aspect a science of the mind, not a religion. And so it's the science of the mind that really plays into Suarigpa, which is the Tibetan healing science. Buddhism has definitely had its influence, but you don't have to be a Buddhist to use Tibetan medicine and heal. There's all kinds of Hindu and Arabic and all different types of people that live in Buddhist countries that use the medicine. And when it comes down to it, every step of what Tibetans do with their medicine is a step of love, from when it's pulled from the ground to when it's created to when it's presented for formulation. And knowing what the deepest premises are of Christianity and Christ's teachings, it's also a pure base of love. And so I choose to stay with that as my grounded foundation rather than the teachings and doctrines of religions and people's opinions. I stay out of that lane and just stay in the pure energy lane, pure spirit lane.
No, I definitely like that. It is true. I mean, the only thing that I really say when anybody asks me about that I say kind of the same thing, but I don't really go into my own opinions even about it. I just say, well, it's the line between science, religion, mysticism, alchemy is all really, really blurred right now anyway. Everyone is, and I've done a lot of like I haven't done, decades of research, but in the research that I've done, I mean, it's much like you said. Everything I've seen is that mostly everybody's saying the same thing, including science. They're just using different words and they're just fighting about what words to use. So that's the only thing I say about it.
Yeah, they're all ingredients in the soup of spirit. That's what it all comes down to. It's spirit expressing itself, and when you understand those ingredients, you can create a pretty wonderful soup.
Sure. And what would you recommend to somebody who's looking to maybe learn a bit more about Tibetan medicine?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to learn more, you're welcome to reach out to us. There's lots of information on the internet. All of our social media platforms have a lot of videos and good information. If you want to bypass all that and just get to the crux of the matter, then just set up a consultation with us for free. Ask your questions. There's no pressure. We're here to serve and help, and we can explore different avenues for what you want to support. For most people in the world right now, we're dealing with a pathogen. We talk about soups. Well, there's a soup of pathogens that's in the air every day. It's mold, fungus, COVID, other flus and viruses, and there's new ones popping up every day. And so our bodies become a galaxy, a universe for these pathogens to live in. And so my biggest suggestion for everybody would be to have a cleanse. We're dealing with things like spike proteins. I won't go into that now, but very real thing to be aware of. Long COVID symptoms, new viruses coming into play that can change those dynamics again. And so we have a formula called Lyme fungus mold, which is it's a comprehensive cleanse from pathogens. It's a cellular cleanse. And so when that formula is used for 30 to 90 days, you're giving your body a reset. You're evicting the pathogens. You're allowing your immune system to bolster and become stronger. And so, if you're sitting in a place where you feel pretty healthy and not anything that you want to focus on specifically, that is something that would benefit every person on the planet right now.
Excellent. That cleansing. Um, is that something that you can do just for the entire year, or is it something you would do once a year or every six
It's
months?
something usually you do once a year. For most people who haven't done a cleanse, we recommend doing one for 3 months. But after that, every 6 months, a 30-day cleanse is more than ample for giving your body support to stay clear and clean.
And as you were going through and making making these different formulas, what's been your inspiration for coming up with these, or are they all have they all been tried and true, or are there any that you've created as well, where you've kind of tweaked?
Yeah, I started
Maybe?
I started creating formulas before I met a Tibetan physician with CBD and terpenes, and began to understand the value of terpenes much more than anybody else was understanding at the time. to let your viewers know, terpenes are the constituents of plants that hold vast amounts of their healing potential. And so, to give you an example, an essential oil like lavender has a terpene in it called linalool. And linalool is what's giving it the healing and the calming and the pain relieving aspects of lavender. And so, when you take that component, that terpene out, you're taking that healing potential out, which remains isolated by itself. But again, when you bring different terpenes into a synergistic combination, you are enabling the spiritual aspect of healing to come back into the dried herbal formulation. Because terpenes in Western Eastern medicine are considered the life force energy of the plant that evaporates at the time of it drying, much like when our spirit leaves our body when we die. And so what attracted our Tibetan physician to us was what we were doing with terpenes, because he'd known for 60 years what terpenes were capable of, but we'd never hit a place with our science where we were able to extract them in an isolated form and then understand how to put them back into the botanical formulations. So he saw what I was doing, and that there was some synergy there with what he had been waiting for time to bring and make possible. And we began contact, and within about 3 months we met each other, and it's been a non-stop process of really expressing his life's work, which is 50 years of research and development of a product line for Western physiologies based on Tibetan medicine. And so I had created formulas at the start. He came in and created new formulas, and then we adapted my formulas to make them even better. And so now, we've really created the whole line together. But Amchi Tubdan is his name, and he is a master physician in Tibetan medicine and a pharmacologist. And so now he formulates the vast majority of everything we do.
Wow, that's absolutely amazing. 50 years of research has gone in then. Wow, it's a long time too.
He was one of the first Westerners to go to India after Tibet was invaded. And he was presented to the Dalai Lama by a Lama that he met there, who realized how much Western training he'd already been through and that he was already very aware of Eastern medicine. And so the Dalai Lama agreed to create a special path of training for him. And for the next 12 years, he studied with the greatest medical minds in Tibet, with the charge to take what he was learning back to the West and adapt in formulations for Western physiologies in preparation for what we're doing now, which is making it available to the world. And it's the first time that a Tibetan pharmacy has been released without the direction of a physician, in every purchase.
That is absolutely amazing. One other question, when you were talking about extracting, without going too much into that, I know one of the methods is using chemicals. Obviously, you guys don't do that. What would be one of the ways that you can extract that you guys extract? It's all natural ways. So how do you extract?
CO2 is a extraction, ethanol. There's all different types of extraction. If we use solvents, it's all organic. But we don't do the extraction of the botanicals ourselves. They go off to labs that we have, and they come back in an extracted, concentrated form. So what we get in 1 gram of powder is equivalent to 10 grams of the actual herb. And so this is pharmacology strength and grade medicine. It's not just a bunch of herbs in a bottle. It's herbs that are 10 or 20 times the strength in a bottle, then awoken with the terpene synergy, which infuses the spiritual aspect of healing, the intelligent aspect of healing. The terpenes, the spirit of the plant, is communicating with our spirit. That's part of the way that communication happens in our own biochemistry. And so when you're having a conversation with your doctor while you're under the knife, you're able to tell him what's going on. He's not just looking for himself and perceiving what he's perceiving, but there's two-way conversations happening. That surgery is going to go a whole lot better.
And actually, you touched on something there that I think even makes this all the more important now. And maybe you let me know your thoughts on this. So that you have 10 grams of the source, and then you get back 1 gram, but it's 10 times as potent, right? Now, I think this is particularly important as we talk about climate change and different things as the sources of these plants go, because one of the things, and again, I don't know, you can tell me if I'm wrong, maybe I'm crazy, but a carrot grown today is not the same as a carrot grown 200 years ago. There's different. They've actually losing nutrients. Is there any worry that in the future we might not have some of these ingredients we need?
Sorry, say that one more time. You're cutting out just a little bit.
Yeah, I apologize. Is there so the a carrot grown 200 years ago doesn't have the same nutrients as the ones we do today. So is there any worry that you might need more and more and more to make the same?
That's been the worry the whole time. That's why Amchi has never pulled the trigger on releasing this to the world, because there wasn't enough. And so he spent the last 40 years through an institute he created with the Dalai Lama called Tanadu, preparing cultivation areas, teaching the lamas and the physicians and the villagers how to propagate greater yields within their crops, how to see places at the right time of the year, which botanicals grow in which places better. And that institute has been operating undaunted for the last 40 years to prepare these cultivation areas for us to have the botanicals we need. And these are botanicals that grow at very high altitude, which is a big difference between most of the botanicals we get from like mainland China or even Europe. They're grown at a lower altitude, which means they're not as potent and viable. If you were a kid and you grew up with your parents in a log cabin in the Himalayas and you had to fight bears and lions just to get your food, compared to a kid who's living in their mom's house in a nice place in Beverly Hills, you learn a lot more and you get a lot stronger and you have a lot more resilience in some aspects. And that's where really the magic of the plants that we use comes from. It's from that robust living conditions that they have to survive through that really make them so efficient at pulling in as much of the nutrients, phytonutrients, minerals, and vitamins and things that we need through that plant to heal.
Let me ask you, this might be an unfair question because you've created all these great formulas, and you've had your own preference for different things. But which formula do you think you're the proudest of?
That would be Healing Heart, which is an interesting thing to say coming from the heart pride, but Healing Heart, it was a game changer for a lot of people who were not able to, and still is every day, for people who couldn't find healing anywhere else. And the reason that formula came about was when I started doing consultations, I went through a period where I was talking with a lot of terminal people. We had somebody who we were helping with cancer that had great results. They went to a cancer group of people that are told that a few weeks or a few months left to live and gave them hope. And so they're all calling in, and which is fine, and we helped a lot of them. But you sit with 12 people in a conversation and they're talking about is they're dying and all of the things that have happened to them in their life. Over time, you start to, if you have an open heart and empathy, you start to take some of that on. And I wasn't doing anything to ground that or release that. And I didn't even know that it was a thing. And so I started having heart palpitations and thought I almost was going to have a heart attack at one point. And a Tibetan physician was aware of it. And he said, we need to support your heart and you need to learn to let that go and not take on other people's energy, even though you're trying to help them. That's not going to help you help others. And so that was part of why we created that formula. The second part was in that same conversation, I told Amchi about a dozen of the people that I was working with, which wasn't, it was a very small portion of the total, but they weren't responding to the protocols that I created for him. And so I pulled the protocols out, showed them to him, told them everything that they'd been dealing with. And after a few minutes of doing that, one of the people that I was talking to about called in our line randomly. Her name's Laurie Moore. She's actually a physician who had to retire because of Lyme's disease. And she was telling us, everything was working so well. And then I had this thing happen with my family and now everything's come back and it's really bad. And I don't know if it's stress related. And she just kind of put his hand on the phone and said, we need to make a heart formula. He's having her block to healing is in her heart. We need to release the trauma that's in the neural network of her heart. And he got up and walked off, and that was the beginning of Healing Heart. About a month or two later, we had the formula and we started with a test group of those 12 people, and every single one of them was able to start letting go what was stuck here that was blocking them from healing on the physical. And so that's a few of the experiences that I've had with Healing Heart. There's been hundreds, but for people that have been struggling with loving themselves, which is oftentimes the hardest thing to do because of the way other people have loved us, you can let that go without having to relive it. And Healing Heart is the most powerful catalyst to that happening that I've ever found. Actually, I've never found anything else that worked like that. So we had to go and create it. And that's how most of our products have come about. It's by necessity. And we also distribute the Tibetan pill medicines that come directly from the medical monasteries. But when something comes along that we can't address with the pills or what we already have created, we'll go to work and create something for it.
Wow. And what does that process look like when the creation process? Is it a long process or is
The
it a
which
monthly?
process?
Is the process of creating the formulas, is it like a long process? You say you've had to create them.
It's for myself, it was a long process because I didn't have I was learning as I was going. For Amchi, it can be an instant flash of there it is. Or like with White Elephant, it can be a long, intense process because you have to factor in variable layer after variable layer after variable layer. All right, what if this happens and this happens? Then we need to offset it. So there's this constant balancing that has to happen, and in modern medicine, we do it in a very different way. His unique gift and ability that he's had since he was a child has been to communicate with plants. You can sit there in the energy field of a plant and understand what it does, what it's capable of, how it works with others. And that's what really led him down the path to becoming a Tibetan physician. And so, his creation process is very unique. It can take anywhere from a few days to, years, depending on the formula.
So I take that to mean that not, not all the time, but occasionally you'll create custom.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, we're speaking to a few different groups right now. We already make some custom formulas for some people that we've worked with for a few years now. We're selective in who we work with. Tibetan medicine capitalized and making a bunch of money off it. That's always been a very big, no. And so when we come across people that are looking to actually make a difference and help others, and then we'll support them and help them with creating what they want to. Right now, we're working with a group of natives that potentially want to make a product out of a mushroom that grows only one place in the world, and putting that together with some Tibetan pharmacology to enhance the benefits of the mushroom. So, yeah, it's something that we do and we're open to. We're always looking to build relationships with people that are on a similar wavelength, and work together and do the best work we can.
I love that. I love that. Love that philosophy. I love that philosophy for sure. Well, Trin, it's been a great show. A lot of great insights. I mean, this is a topic I could go on about for hours because I have a ton of annoying questions. I'm sure,
No rubbish.
but we are coming up pretty close to the time. Is there anything that you wish you would have asked but didn't ask, or anything you wanted to cover that we didn't cover today?
Just that there's a lot of fear about health. I had a lot of fear myself. That was a big part of what I had to go through. And there's things to be fearful of, but there's also things to be really grateful for, and to become aware of. And when you become grateful and aware of the things that actually make a difference, that fear starts to dissolve and go away. And we talk about procrastination. Fear is the killer of doing things. When you get into a state of fear and you don't want to do anything, you're stuck there. And so my suggestion in parting would be for people to step out of that fear, step into the unknown, start to look at things that are outside of your comfort zone, and then listen to what your intuitive internal guidance system is saying. Sit with something and hold it. If you feel like crap and discordant energy, don't use it. If you sit with something and it makes you feel like your mom just walked in with an apple pie, you probably want to give it a try. There's an innate wisdom within all of us that allows us to know which way to go. It takes silence and removing ourselves from that fear to be able to hear that voice.
Such a powerful note to end the show on. Just before we go, Trin, what's the best way for our listeners to reach out, learn more?
Yeah, you can email me directly at trinn@jampa.com. You can also reach us at heal.me/Jampa. Jampa is spelled Jampha. Those two options will be the fastest emails. I respond to every day, morning and evening. And our Heal Me's, we have sessions available every weekday. And if there's a time that is more convenient, you're not able to meet during the allotted hours, then we'll set up a time, and that works for you.
Well, thank you so much for your time today, Trin. And to our listeners, don't worry about grabbing a pen and paper. We are going to have that in the show notes for you, so it'll be easy for you to find. But once again, thank you so much for being on the show, Trin. And to all our listeners, thank you for tuning in. And just
Thank you.
remember, if you can't find that motivation or inspiration for yourself today, maybe just go out and try to be that motivation or inspiration for someone else. And we'll see you again next time.